السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين. So we begin seeking refuge with God from the cursed devil, and we begin in the name and remembrance of all that describes the divine truth, in that He is beneficent, merciful, compassionate, loving, kind, and gentle. And we praise and glorify Him for all of His perfection and all of His favors and blessings that He has surrounded us. And we ask Him to send His peace and blessings and mercy upon His final messenger, Muhammad. Surah Al-Baqarah is called Surah Al-Baqarah because of today's discussion. And it's very important for us to learn these very core themes, because the surah is like 286 verses. So it's very long. And it has so much detail of faith and historical prophethood and law and creed and all kinds of things, spirituality, character, all of that. It's the most comprehensive surah. But it's warning us about what can happen with the chosen people complex. We are the holy chosen ones. We are the people of God. When you start to think like that, what kind of attitudes you might develop that are counterproductive towards a spiritual reality. So the story of the cow, basically it starts out that Prophet Moses, peace and blessings be upon him, was dealing with a reality in which there had been a murder. And the detail of that murder is many different stories. As we have said before, the Prophet ﷺ did not actually prohibit anywhere in any authentic teaching that you could learn from or read from the Israelites about Scripture and Revelation. He did say, go ahead and learn and talk about it. حدثوا عن بني إسرائيل ولا حرج ولا تصدقوهم ولا تكذبوهم. That don't just because of whatever they say agree or disagree. Rather, what we understand from this hadith is that you would look into the Quran and you would gauge. So that's why many of the scholars like Ibn Kathir and others, they said, well, these stories we're bringing that we've learned from them, they add value and they give us clarity to some ambiguous Quranic verses. So this is just helping us along the way. So the story, as it's exactly narrated in the Quran, that he told his people, everyone, I'm commanding you by God's command that you should slaughter a cow. Okay? And so they immediately responded, do you take us for fools? You think we're foolish and silly? Wow, what is this? Why are we all of a sudden all have to... And the reason why this seems foolish is, as we'll see later, that there was a murder that took place. And so his prophetic response to what should we do about this murder is slaughter a cow. So that seems kind of weird. So that's what it says. So then Moses responds back very clearly, I seek refuge with God from being among the foolish, ignorant people. Meaning, I don't play around. I don't mock or joke around when it comes to divine revelation. As a human being, prophets can joke. The Prophet ﷺ joked. Okay, they're not some robotic, weird people. They are normal people. But when it comes to revelation and prophethood and the truth of religion, that is not the place for joking and playing around. So now when he made that clear, what they understand the implications is somehow slaughtering a cow is going to somehow solve this murder that we have in front of us. And so that seems like a strange task. So now they respond that if you could just tell us about the cow. Tell us a little bit about the cow. And so he's responding that God has told me that this is a cow who is middle-aged. It's not a old cow that's barren and can no longer give children, and it's not a small young cow, a calf of sorts. So just do what you're told. So where it says here, so just do what you're told, all of the different scholars from our history, as well as the Israelite reports on this story, narrate that had they have just slaughtered any old cow even before this question, any cow, because it said the original command of God was slaughter a cow. But they decided in their way of thinking that religion must be very strict or very detailed oriented. You know? So they said, well, let's ask what kind of cow is it? But they were not told. The only reason why they're getting an answer, and this is a very important point, is because they keep looking and they keep asking. So God is going to respond to them. And this will teach them a lesson about treating religion as nitpicky details rather than overarching spiritual directives and objectives and intents and purposes. There is an ultimate divine wisdom. And when he says, do this, as a believer, I should just do it, right? If that's God talking, and let's not forget, they have now witnessed many miracles, these people. This is not a people who are not sure that Moses has the power of God behind him. These are people who have lived in and witnessed amazing miracles. And this is now, they're asking for what's the proof. So then they said, call upon your Lord and ask him, what exactly color is it? Tell us what color this cow is. And so then it gets a little bit more detailed. So the way it comes down is, إِنَّهُ يَقُولُ إِنَّهَا بَقَرَةٌ صَفْرَاء. So, فَاقِعُ لَوْنُهَا, a very clear color. And when you see it, you're like, wow, that's a beautiful cow, right? So it's a yellow cow. Some scholars have described this as cream colored because they didn't have a word for cream color. So it's not like yellow, like, you know, yellow, right? But something not white, but more towards yellow than white. And so, but it's one color, right? It's not like a spotted cow like many cows are. It's just like that. So now the requests are bringing a much more difficult cow to find, making their religion what? Difficult on them. Yeah. And so this is a famous verse. I think is in. I think it's also in Baqarah. لا تسألوا عن أشياء إن تبد لكم تسؤكم. Don't ask about things that if you found out the detail of it, it will cause difficulty or harm towards you. Right? I'll never forget whenever I was I was in Florida, and this brother was sending me this long, detailed analysis of foods and stuff, and Ahl al-Kitab and all of that. Muhammad bin Salih al-Uthaymeen, one of the great scholars, rahmatullahi alayhi, of Saudi Arabia, mashallah, he had many great benefits. You know, maybe a lot of us think that we're having a hard time with because he was from Saudi and he understood and lived in that reality, so he dealt with it accordingly. But on this one, somebody asked him, what should we do about the meats of the Ahl al-Kitab? So Muhammad, if you know Ibn Uthaymeen, he's like seen as the greatest scholar of Saudi Arabia next to Ibn Baz, you know, like they were. He actually was asked to be the mufti of the whole country, the grand mufti, and he turned it down so as to not be perceived as, you know, government oriented, right? He wanted to keep his own autonomy. He said, why would you ask any questions? The Quran says, the meat from the people of the book is allowed for you. It didn't give you any conditions. It didn't say, according to this and according to that, and then follow all the laws of Sharia that we have. It says, Ahl Kitab, they have their own way of doing things, and they're Ahl Kitab, so just eat it. That's what he said. And so that's one of the examples of somebody who's very aware of all these things, and the problems of Bani Israel, and why we should not emulate that. Because what Bani Israel feel like is religion should be a matter of rules. Very strict rules. And we need to be very clear about these rules. And so if you look in Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, as the Messiah, coming to, as the Messiah should, reform them and bring them back to a proper understanding, he was questioning these detailed rules and encouraging them to go back to the spirit of the law, the spiritual nature of it. You know, like, he who has no sin cast the first stone, right? So like they said, this woman is a prostitute. So the famous story is Jesus comes in there and he sees them all picking up rocks about to stone her, because obviously the Jews believe in stoning an adulteress, as we have in the Bible, the story. And so they're about to throw, and he says, he who has no sin cast the first stone. And many of the commentators of that from the Christian community say, because probably many of these actual men standing there about to stone her have actually slept with this woman. And who are they? You know? And so this issue of, we're the men, and this is the law, and here's the proof, and here's the law, and we're going to get you with the rules. Even the Prophet ﷺ did something very similar when the woman came to him and said, I've done zina. He didn't say, okay, everybody, the rules, strict. He said, well, go repent. This is the hadith in Baqarah. Go repent. He's understanding she's a sincere person who's not creating corruption in society, and she's actually very humbly. So he's seeing for her a great opening for repentance and an easier way. The law is there for certain reasons. We're not saying cancel the law. We're saying don't be nitpicky and see the spirit of the law in that. Just be a servant of God. He said, do that, do that. Keep it simple. Don't make it difficult. So now they're looking for this yellow cow. So then they said, okay, hold on. So if you could just call upon your Lord one more time after all of that, and then tell us a little bit more clarity, because for us most cows look the same. So we don't want to get the wrong cow, right? And so then they said, and if God wills, we will be guided. So they're adding that whole vibe. Actually, God willed for them a long time ago to go slaughter a cow. And they're not doing it, because they're looking for all of the strict rules about it that could be. And they see themselves as holding a very special place as the chosen people. Right? And by the way, I've talked to some rabbis, and they've actually expounded this to me. They said, we Jews, we are the one chosen nation. They have this aqidah. They do not believe God sent messages to all the corners of the earth, as the Quran tells us. They believe only them, out of all people, they are the only tribe of people who have been given divine guidance from a direct, prophetic, revelatory, divine law standpoint. Everybody else is just based on some fitrah, and they're just supposed to be good people, and that's it. They're not responsible for all the laws. So we're responsible for all the laws. So he's still carrying it, the rabbi, right? So they're saying, surely will be, God willing, we will be guided if you will just show us. So this says, then he says that this cow is a cow that is very independent. It is not a cow that is busy tilling the earth and irrigating the water. It doesn't do these things. And it doesn't have any flaw anywhere on it. Now it's becoming very difficult. Because all the cows they know are doing one of these things, and then the yellow cow, now it's becoming very, very difficult. And so then it says, finally they slaughtered it, and they almost did not even slaughter it. So the narrations tell us that what happened was among them, and there's different narrations to the story, but bottom line is, so here's an interesting point. If you remember back, how many tribes of the Asbat are there? How many Israelite tribes are there? The 12 tribes of Israel, 12 children of Jacob. Now, those are actually all related, like very clearly related, and they're from one father and all that. Why do you think that they needed 12 different springs so that everyone would know which one was there? There's inner fighting. You cannot appreciate the Ansar and the Muhajirin until you look at some of the historical realities of the Israelites. Ansar and the Muhajirin, the Muslims that embraced the Prophet in Mecca, and then those in Medina, even with some people cultivating and some people given to hypocrisy to try to fit into the new power structure, there was never any story of anybody murdering anybody. And whenever it came close to that, the Prophet ﷺ was very staunch not to allow it to happen. And we don't have any narration ever of any of the Prophet's companions murdering each other. But yet this is just one example, and there are others, actually. So the story is one of the tribes murdered somebody because of some deal, and then he threw the body into another tribe saying, and they're like, we didn't do this. So now everybody's fighting, and it's about to become some big deal. So God tells Moses, tell them, slaughter a cow. He's trying to teach them, you guys just can't just obey, right? So just obey. That's all you need to do. And so now they've gone through all of this, and then the narrations say that at the end of the day, they had to travel hundreds of miles, and then they found a family, and one of them said that this is a very special cow, and the owner of it was an orphan. And this is all that he had. And so they ended up paying 10 times or whatever worth what it was worth, and they spent the whole entire treasure to buy this cow. Even though some of them owned cows in the first place, right? So they went through all of this. So the religion has clear directives in it, and there is divine wisdom, but what we are learning here is, as we'll see right here. So let's go through the final two verses, and then we'll see why it comes in that order, or one reason why perhaps it comes in this order. So this is وَإِذَا قَتَلْتُمْ نَفْسًا فَدَارَأْتُمْ فِيهَا. That remember when you killed somebody, and then you got into a big debate and arguing about this, then God will cause to become apparent what you are hiding, right? So then God said, hit the dead body with a piece of the cow that you have slaughtered. And then he will come, this dead man who was killed will wake up and stand up and be like, that guy killed me right there. So this was a miracle that took place. And then it took place exactly like that. So then he says, يُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. He shows you his signs so that you can rationalize the message. So, as a believer who, like these Israelites right here, who's seen the proofs, these people aren't just new meeting Moses. And they're like, who the heck are you and what the heck is this slaughtering a cow? These are people who lived through the miracles. As we've said, they've lived through it. They know he is with divine support. He's the messenger of God. They're aware of this. But they are still acting in this way. So what we're learning from the order, it seems, as some of the scholars have put it, that God is saying, just obey first, even if you don't necessarily understand. But God will explain to you. The scripture is full of evidences. We have great scholars to explain لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, so that you can rationalize and understand it. But do not hold back on your obedience and following the religion until someone brings you the reasoning for it. Because basically what you're saying is obedience to God is conditional upon me understanding why. What I would say you're saying at that point for most people is, I'm not so sure about this religion, right? So it needs to make sense, which is the modern way we're dealing with, right? Now everybody's challenging everything in the scriptures because people in the modern world have decided certain things. And they keep changing their mind. Like I was just recently asked to be part of the Sex Week at UNC Charlotte to discuss religion and the relationships and all that, marriage and so forth. It turns out it was an LGBTQ event, and it's good to have some balance to the discussion. So it came out, interestingly enough, in this discussion that one of the women that were there is a devout Christian. One of the attendees is a devout Christian. So the two pastors are LGBT, and then the rabbi is Reform or non-denominational or something like that. And she's saying, according to rabbinical, historical, this is some laws, but according to most Jews now, like she's talking in like this. And so I just told them, what marriage is and who it is and what healthy sexual lifestyle is and how that works. husband and wife and all these things, and why that was intended and what's its purpose, and how religion and biology are pretty much on the same page here. So it's not really, I don't know why it's a big debate. But it came out, this young student, who was a devout Christian, listen to what she said. She said, I have to agree with the imam here. It seems like what people are doing now is that they're trying to make their idea of what's normal, or what society is telling them is normal, the standard that regulates historical revelation and the will of God. And so basically the idea is whatever we think, and we are just we right now in Charlotte 2018. There were a we who were super smart and the most modern people in their time 1,000 years ago, and there's going to be a we 1,000 years from now, and they're all going to have very different ideas, all three of those groups. Okay? So that is not a standard. So the question that we brought to them is, without revelation, we're just animals, as they want us to be, right? So that's why we have revelation, to rise above an animal and become angelic. You see? And so, first we have to address the faith part. Why do I believe? Why should I be a Muslim? Right? And so what I'm telling the kids, and this is, you're going to have to tell your kids this, that you should not just be Muslim because we said so. That is not a reason. Religion is not something you inherit from your parents. Religion is something you become convinced of, particularly when you get around the age of discernment or puberty or somewhere around there. You start to think for yourself and rationalize concepts. So we should be heavily focused on young ages, not so much on this food, that food, and all that. Because you'll get many kids that can tell you, you can't eat this, you can't eat that, you can't eat this. And it's a matter of scholarly debate on all that stuff, by the way. Right? But if you ask the kid, tell me what this phrase means. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Or La ilaha illallah. Those, I have no idea what you're talking about. I could not tell you the beginning of that. Right? So spirituality has got thrown out the window, and the rules and the nitpicky, trivial attitude of religiosity has taken the driver's seat in the ummah. So this is where Surah Al-Baqarah is just the second chapter of the Quran. We have to review as an ummah, because we are focusing that the identity is based in nitpicky stuff. These are the rules. I was in a sitting one time, and one of the people in the room is a sister that we all know does not pray the 5 prayers. Everybody that knows her knows this, right? And yet, there's a non-Muslim guy in the room, and he's meeting Muslims for the first time, and we're all talking in a cordial, 2 families getting together, and this sister, who does not pray, starts telling this guy, who's being exposed to Muslims the first time, that you're wearing a silk tie and you wear gold, and that you shouldn't be doing that. Let's see, with your gold ring and your silk tie. You know, as a Muslim man, you should not do that. He was like, well, I'm not a Muslim man. She's like, well, I'm just saying. And then I'm sitting there about to just pull my hair out. I cut it short now, because I've been through that a lot over the years. So as an ummah, we have to get out of this nitpicky stuff. And we have to focus on, first, the fundamentals of why do we believe. The prophetic, miraculous truths. There are many. There is an overabundance of those. The prophetic prophecies from previous scriptures. It even goes to Hinduism. Zakir Naik brought the Upanishads or something like this, and they had 2,000 Hindus become Muslim, because he's showing them that in their ancient Sanskrit scriptures, there's a great prophet going to come out, a great holy man come out of Arabia with this word of God, right? And in one of them it calls him Muhammad. So, and however that looks in Sanskrit. So it's like, what? And so it's just not like the you know, and I was talking one time to I was talking to a Native American guy who's 100%, like, he's preserved his identity. He's a rare unicorn in this unfortunate genocide that took place by the people who came here from Europe. And he was telling me that, you know, we have this belief that God sent specific sages and wise holy men, and that in the end there will be a clear one that comes to all of us, right? He was saying we believe that there is like a messianic figure to come, and he will be sent to the whole world, right? And he will be able to address everybody's issues evenly, right? some sort of a world thing. I don't know, now it seems like we're trying to dominate the world again. What is this? By the way, though, even Jesus, when he comes back, that is what the Prophet ﷺ has said, that the whole world will come under this submission to the will of God, and there will be peace for like 40 years or whatever. So we start with the foundations. Why should we believe? What are the miracles and the proofs? I can tell you, as a kid, one of the most compelling things about me being a Christian was watching the movie Jesus of Nazareth. Watching Jesus of Nazareth is like filled with miracles, right? He's doing all these miracles. He's walking on water, he's doing this, he's the leper, the blind, all that stuff, And so I'm like, wow, this guy is, the real deal. We're at the state where we can't even make a movie about Prophet Muhammad. So something like that's haram or something like that. Some of you are looking at me strange. There is no Quranic verse or hadith that says it is haram to make a movie. That is an ijtihad from so many scholars because of a mentality that somehow that will create problems. Guess what they have done with this ijtihad fatwa? They have invented the problem. Had they never said that, then I don't know. I mean, if they had just said, well, I don't think so, as long as, in my humble assessment, as long as the portrayal is done correct according to the seerah, and there is no mockery or disrespect in any way, and it's approved of by the people who are knowing the seerah, it should be okay. I mean, no problem with that. It will actually, in this modern time where people don't read, it will be much more compelling. But so, obviously that's a big controversial thing, and I don't see it happening too soon. Although the Bilal movie was pretty compelling. It was a good movie. It wasn't the exact story of Bilal, but it was a very important part of what is important from his life story. Then after you get these foundations of miraculous truth, prophecies, the miracles of the Quran, whether it be scientific or legislative, there are verses in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet that far before the United States Constitution and the Magna Carta were saying those things. And the way they picture the Magna Carta in the United States is these documents that came after great enlightenment and rigorous challenging of all the old corrupt ways, where all of those white men came together and thought deeply and challenged each other with ideas of growth and human rights and development. One guy, a merchant, shepherd guy from Arabia, was saying all those things long before without anybody else telling him to say that. Without no way would he have... There's no reference for these ideas in the world. It's just what he got from God. And which proves, if that's how long it took you as the great thinkers of the developed Western world to come up with these similar, we call that al-i'jaz al-tashri'i, the miraculous legislation of the Quran. I mean, even everybody embracing Islam in Arabia. Some guy said, I'm hearing this message from an angel Gabriel, and I'm the messenger of God. And so 23 years later, the whole entire peninsula is following him as the prophet of God. That's a very, very unique thing in history. Actually, it never happened like that for any prophet or any claimed prophet, right? That's quite miraculous. So there's many miracles. We can go on and on and on. So once we establish that, then we go into the foundations of spirituality and belief and character. What is your soul about? Where did it come from? Where is it going? What's its purpose? Who is your Lord and Maker, Provider, Sustainer? How is God described properly? How do we know and get close to God by understanding Him and His nature? So you get onto all of that, and then you look at, my character is going to reflect or not reflect the light of God, and so I have to be that person. So while you're doing that, you're getting into worship, So worship is now becoming easier for you because of the proofs, and the purpose of worship is not to get rewards. That is a byproduct of worship. The purpose of worship is to get close to God. That's why we're doing it. To choose to put Him before our own desires. That's why we're doing that. So when somebody's not praying, they're basically saying, I got things more important than you, God. I know you're telling me I'll go to heaven and I will be a good believer if I just keep these 5 prayers. But in my opinion, I have other things that I should be doing with my time. So now you are saying that your selfishness has overgone. So whoever would protect themselves from their stinginess and selfishness, they were the true successful. That's what it's really all about. is overcoming yourself and attaching yourself to the divine. That's what religion is. That's what the concept of Islam is. And so now, you can be an obedient servant of God, and so whenever the laws come, you just do whatever you know He said to do. I think that's it. Now, as we see in the scripture, then do we just say, oh, we do, we hear and we obey, and that's it? That's the whole thing? Or do we say, we do, we hear and we obey? Well, I'd like to understand this. Didn't He explain it to us after? You should look to understand it. For two reasons. To give you clarity in your purpose, as well as to help you communicate to others, why do we have this teaching? And so, a large amount of laws when it comes to human relations on earth, are a large, huge percentile of those are going to have a beautiful wisdom of protecting and promoting individual and social welfare and averting individual and social harm and corruption. You will see that in all of the laws. Now when it comes to some laws, it's like God said so. And that was intently put there like that. You should not feel like your mind should wrap itself around everything that is the ultimate absolute truth of divinity and purpose. Because we are still just specks of dust on this planet called Earth. We should not put ourselves in a higher than that. Because that's what modern atheism, what modern polytheism is, the worship of the human brain. It's like, whatever I think makes sense, whatever I've come to know, whatever I can see and feel is the truth, which is self-worship. It's attributing omniscience to one's own thought process or one's society's inclinations as a culture. So it's people worship or self-worship, which is polytheism. So that if we take this understanding, and if we look at Surah Al-Baqarah, it goes exactly as I have said this thing to you. Those order of the miracles, the proof, the everything, understanding, spirituality, and all of that. That's how the Quran begins, and then it goes through, and it gives you spirituality and character and the purpose and the meaning, and then it will give you some laws. And it will give you some clarity as to the purpose of those laws, what will happen as a result. So I think what we take from that is this, the religion has priorities, intents and purposes and objectives, and we should not drown in the trivial matters and try to nitpick about it. So I think it's fair. There should be questions because some people are like, well, where do I draw the line, right? Like, should I just not care what's in the food and this and that, Should I or not, right? If you have to do a chemistry research to figure out what's in this thing, so you know what, Ibn Hazm al-Andalusi, one of our great scholars, he was a very literalist guy, a simplistic literalist. So somebody asked him about the concept of istihala, has something changed and what is it? He said, I look at what it is, and if it looks like pork or something wrong, I will not eat it. But if it doesn't look anything or taste or smell or look like pork to me, then I will not consider it pork, because we know what pork is. It's ham. It's the lahm. It is the meat from a pig. You know what that looks like, smells like, and some of us know what it tastes like, because we haven't, always been Muslim, right? So, and then the issues about why alcohol and it being and all of that. So you can solve this thing. Why did God prohibit alcohol? Right? Why do you think? It's well known. He mentioned it. He said, "Kullu muskirin haram." All intoxicants are prohibited. If there's no way by eating this thing I would ever get intoxicated, even if I ate 10 dishes of it or 20 glasses of it, then is it haram? You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So the point is intoxication. We can't go nitpicking, And so this is where many scholars would explain to you. So some people are saying, well, alcohol is an impure substance. Okay, but there's a legitimate debate on that one, right? So the scholars and some of the tabi'een and the sahaba actually said, we have no proof for that. And they said, when the Prophet ﷺ saw the guy urinating, when he finished in the mosque, he said, go get the water and pour it over there. So we all knew that means what? That urine is what? It's a najis. It needs to be purified by water poured over it, right? So when the authentic hadiths tell us that when the narration came down that alcohol is prohibited, stay away from it, many Sahaba had barrels of alcohol in their house. Because it wasn't haram yet. It was just you can't go to your prayers like that, okay? So they went out and poured it all out in the streets and stuff. Well, they're going to walk through there and that's going to come to the mosque with them and all that. That's a lot, right? But there's no narration. Oh, well, you've all now poured this out there, so we need to pour water over it because it's impure. So one time I asked my sheikh, I said, Sheikh, how did all the schools of thought seem to adopt some opinion about the impurity of alcohol when there's really nothing that would say it? He said two reasons. He said, number one, there's the ayah in Surah Al-Ma'idah. إنما الخمر والميسر والأنصاب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان فاجتنبوه. So, alcohol, gambling, divination, wheels and arrows, and idols are all from the filthy handiwork of the devil. So stay away from them, right? So he said here, it said filth. Rijis is like najis. Those two words technically mean the same thing. So he said stay away from them and they're filthy. So he said the second thing is that the scholars, after the Sahaba and the Tabi'een, they codified the law and they made Islamic legal principles. They said, كُلُّ سَائِلٍ حَرَامٌ فَهُوَ نَجِسٌ. Anything that's liquid, that is prohibited to buy and sell or eat or drink, then it becomes, we consider it najis. So blood and urine, all those things, you know, that's he said we just made a principle. So then I read a research done by Sheikh Salman al-Uda, rahimahullah ta'ala, hafidhullah ta'ala, and he basically explained that the first argument is not good because no scholar ever said that dice for gambling or cards or backgammon pieces are impure. That if you touch them, you need to wash, otherwise you have... No scholar said that. Same thing with the idols. Even the idols. If you touched an idol, no scholar ever said that you need to wash impurity off of you. So the ayah is saying all those are the same. So clearly it's an abstract meaning of impurity. And then he brings the ayah. إِنَّمَا الْمُشْرِكُونَ najis. It says in Surah At-Tawbah that the polytheists are impure. So can you imagine there are many Brahmin polytheists who are very adamant about cleanliness and purity, or OCD, for example, you know, and they are very, very clean. I'm sure there's probably millions of them, okay? What is being talked about, as all the scholars of tafsir said, is it's a spiritual impurity, right? So these things are spiritually impure. Why? Because the alcohol removes your spirituality and makes you act in a very messed up way. Masid turns wealth into a big game and ruins whole lives. You know, gambling. And then divination, you make these big decisions in life by shooting an arrow or going to a soothsayer, right? He throws down the bones or whatever, and you're like, okay, well, the bones, that's what we have to do now. You know, now your whole life has changed. And that has nothing to do with anything. And then idols, obviously, we see as mushrikun. So he said, the thing, kullu sa'al haram for najis, he said, that's a scholarly interpreted principle that's not an ayah from the Quran, it's not a hadith. They just wanted to make some fancy classification and codification, which is a good thing. Our scholars wanted to be scientific long ago. They wanted to structure in a very scientific way the laws of Islam. That being said, that's an interpretation, it's an opinion. So he's saying without clear proof, we can't call something najis. So you don't have that, and then all you have is everything that is intoxicating is haram. So if the ice cream or the cake or the whatever lemonade or whatever it is does not intoxicate according to factual science, and one way to know that is you need to be 21 to buy it. That's one of the laws here. If you can get intoxicated by it, there is a law that you need to get somebody's ID. If they're not asking, they're very strict, by the way. I got my gray hair going now, man. You know, they would ask me. They would say, hey, man, we need to see your ID. I'd be like, man, come on, man, I'm like 50 years old. They don't care. Like, you know, even for cigarettes, mashallah. They're very strict about this. So surely they have a policy that they're following because of all the harms that have come. You know, like even when it comes to other things, I'm going a little bit on a tangent. Have you ever heard Muslims saying, Now they're shocking and the animals. Look what they're doing to these animals. They're putting shock on them. If you study the history of legislation in America, it is actually the animal rights organizations that called for a better way than just cutting them without any sort of way. And the idea of putting drugs in it and then what that could potentially do to the meat, they said shocking or bolting the brain removes the feeling of the pain is what's happening. So they don't feel their neck getting cut and this slow death. It's just seems like a shock and then they're dead, or the bolt and then they just basically faint. They're unconscious, you know. So that's why they're doing that, right? So the laws are not like torturous, evil laws. Some people are trying to make things better. So all of the laws we have are generally trying to protect. I don't know what they're going to do with all this deregulation under Trump, but before there was this idea we need to regulate businesses and all that for the protection of society. So with the alcohol industry and all the problems that they have that they're dealing with, they have this very strict thing about being 21. So that's what I always tell people. You know, like one brother said, but I heard about the kombucha. You about the kombucha? You guys know about kombucha? Yeah, we have a millennial in the house. It's this new tea that they make from fermenting some things and all that. And for me, it's a doubtful matter. I'm going to say it's doubtful because I did a research on it. And basically with capitalism, it could get to the level of a wine cooler. But they're assuming that because it's a pretty heavy drink, it's not like something you just drink it like water. And it's not something you can just easily super get used to like a Coke or a Pepsi. It's pretty heavy stuff. And it has lots of health benefits, by the way. But it can come up to the level of a wine cooler. Now, if you drank 6-7 wine coolers in an hour, you would have some feeling change. Would you get drunk? No. Right? So that's why they're not requiring the 21 on this one. But your thought process and your attitude, your level of confidence and stuff, buzzy feeling could come if you decide to drink, you know, because they come in tall bottles, like 4 or 5 of those now. You know, but I think what I read in when they were trying to make this point, why they don't go for the need for that, they were saying that it would probably create stomach issues, you know, even though it's actually by itself, one of them is actually going to help your digestion system, and it's really healthy. There's all those, what do you call them, probiotics in there. All these natural probiotics in it. Yeah, it has all that stuff in there. So, for me, it's a doubtful matter. I couldn't say haram, but I would say I just avoid it because I'm still not sure about it, right? So let's just be careful on that one, right? So you take your religion simple, you know, like, what is it? I'm not sure. It says there's some alcohol. It says contains mild, very small amounts of alcohol. So then I go look it up. Find out. I'm not sure. I'll leave it alone, right? But here's where the problem comes. Everybody, don't drink that. It's haram. Who are you? And why are you making this big fatwa? And why are you making this the ultimate priority of the religion where you're going around doing al-amr bil ma'ruf and nahy al-munkar about some small thing? Right? For your own thing, okay, let's not make things into a big deal. We got bigger fish to fry on the totem pole of Islamic priorities. Any other questions? I'm inventing questions. Come on, guys, make it fun.
I have a question, but there was a hadith about relating maybe to what Bani Israel did in terms of they made it difficult on them. This is what I'm saying. ما أمرتكم بأمر فأتوا منه
ما استطعت. Yeah.
So I'm not sure. Comment on that one. And also I think sometimes he had another hadith which says, if I was given a choice between two things, I always choose the easier one, unless it is haram.
And this is this goes into a big subject, but we'll summarize it in simplicity. That, you know, there's an interesting point about the priority of obligations versus prohibitions. So he says, whatever I have commanded you, do as much as you can, the best you can of it, right? But what I prohibited you, stay away from it, right? So what we learn from that is that there will be circumstances and situations in which it will probably create some hardship or difficulty for you to do the obligation. So the law will naturally give facilitations in this, right? As long as you're being honest with yourself and God about this, right? Whereas there will never be a facilitation. Well, like you have these people nowadays, the shabab, and they're making fatwas, I went to a MSA program in Florida one time, and literally a young man had the audacity, because I told him, ask anything, let's deal with it. So he had the audacity to ask me, well, now the way things are, if you're using a condom, so then technically the skin is not touching, so therefore, is it really zina? And I was like, yo, zina is haram, man. You should never been alone in the first place. Now you're trying to tell me that because there's not iltiqa and khitanin or whatever, that they're not touching. So that's haram, right? And then the same crowd, it's the Florida crowd, mashallah. So the next one, somebody said, well, there's a big, claim that, many scholars are allowing you to use Adderall to help you study. It's like, so if you can get prescribed Adderall, which all you have to say is, I can't focus, to a psychiatrist, and then they will prescribe you with a methamphetamine, and have a very strong amphetamine, right? Actually, if you look at Adderall as a chemical design, and then you look at methamphetamines that they make in the lab, it's pretty much the same thing. Okay. So then they said, okay, so if that's allowed, and I was like, hold on, who said that's allowed? Anyways, wait, what just happened here?
People want method here.
Hang on, I'm trying to hold on. So you can lie to a psychiatrist to get Adderall because we need to study. What happened to coffee? They're like, coffee doesn't work anymore. I was like, what happened to monster drinks and stuff, man? Get a Red Bull or something, They said, well, they're telling us people are dying of heart attacks. And I was like, you guys are talking about doing Adderalls, and people can't drink a monster drink, okay? And so they're like, yeah, we heard a kid drank 3 of those in one night and died. And I was like, why is he drinking 3? Why does he need 3? Get some sleep, man. So then they busted out with literally, he took it to the next level. He said, okay, well, the reason why alcohol and all that stuff is haram because it intoxicates, which means your mental thing is messed up and you're not knowing what's going on or making good decisions or knowing what you're saying, right? It's like, well, cocaine and amphetamine actually heighten your ability to rationalize and think, and you're actually smarter.
Oh my God.
And I was like, how do you know that? Well, I'm asking on behalf of someone else. And so they said, so then why would that be haram? I said, because it's illegal, number one. The Muslim is awfu bil uqud. We have to fulfill our legal obligations. And even if it was legal, we have to look at the thing of the harm of it. It's addictive. You need more and more. It harms your body. It harms your brain. It kills synapses. So while, yes, and I will admit, I know from not being Muslim around the people I was around, at that moment, you can win the video game easily. Okay? But after that, the come down and the headaches, and clearly you've ruined yourself. You are going to ruin yourself. Okay? When you do your body like that, you will create some harms there and addictions, and then what happens with the addictions and what people go through and how their life is ruined. There's people that start out like that and then they end up on crack on the street. And this is not extreme, by the way. This happened to people who were, by the way, I remember one girl from a Catholic high school. Specifically, I'll say her first name. Her name is Marcy. Her parents are very wealthy, up-class, Tulsa, Oklahoma parents. She's from a very wealthy background. And Marcy, she used to get into the cocaine. And she was doing that here and there on a weekend. And then, before you know it, she's graduating. She's out stealing from her parents and hawking stuff from her family's house and buying crack cocaine and smoking it all day. Her whole life was ruined. Ended up arrested and in jail with intent to distribute because now she's trying to feed her addiction. So she's got all this stuff, she's selling it so she can make money out of it and all of this. I saw this happen to somebody in the school that I was raised in. So this stuff's illegal and haram and wrong for many, many reasons, right? So that's where, now people, they're trying to find a way, the other way. But back to what mashallah, Abdul Manan was saying, the religion is easy. Okay, it will make sense and it's easy. It's rational and easy. So whenever it says, the Prophet ﷺ, that Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, if the Prophet was given two options, one is more difficult than the other, but we know neither one of them is haram, right? He would take the easier of the two. So, I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in one of these whole things, and you may think I'm contradicting what I said before, but I'm not. If you know two schools of thought within Islam, or two great, well-known, testified prominent scholars have said an opinion on a matter, and you listen to both of them, and you don't see one's really just winning the debate, but you see one makes more sense and is easier, so make my life easier, so you take that opinion. There's a large contingency of religious Muslims, and about, I'm going to say, half of the scholars are going to say, well, you should be safe with your religion here, and take the more stricter one to be farther from haram. Because one of them is saying, this one could be haram, the other one is saying it's not haram, right? So, but actually, you're listening to the proofs and you're seeing ample proofs given on both sides. So the doubt here, is it haram? Because the original ruling is what? In Usul al-Fiqh books, if you look in the books of derivational methodology, the beginning of the discussion of halal and haram, they say, al-aslu fil ashya al-hil. The basic ruling of things is ibaha, permissibility. Okay? And so he said, except that which was clearly defined in the Quran and the Sunnah as prohibited. So everything is generally accepted as so the certainty, okay, is that everything's permissible until it's proven to me that that's haram, right? So if this scholar is using some questionable, not clear-cut teachings from the Quran and the Sunnah or interpretive thing, like, for example, when it comes to like women, there's so many things about women. It's like if you look at the Quran and the Sunnah, that should not be haram. Right? For example, women praying in the musalla. There is actually ample evidence that the Prophet was teaching and condoning women praying in the same hall with no barriers. Right? That's the sunnah. Okay? But you got all these scholars saying, no, now it's fitna. Because we've decided there's a fitna there. Right? And they say, so we got to make a new rule. Right? So what's better for everybody and going to help everybody spiritually? Be all part of the same jama'ah and listen to the same program, praying in the same imam, and all of that without having to go through with dungeons and faulty video camera or video. So make it easier on everybody. Make everybody part of the same thing. Why do you take some opinion that it doesn't make sense to you? They're trying to make you, but we'll be safe now. What are you being safe about? To go against the sunnah of the Prophet? Right? Because of an assumption that women are fitna. Which is not a very nice thing to say about all of our wives and mothers and sisters and daughters. Right? Why are we generalizing that there's some big problem? Isn't the problem with the man's desire anyway? And why is he going to do that in the mosque, but everywhere else nobody's making a problem with it? Like, why would the one place that this would happen be in the salat? Like, if you watch them, many mosques will have no problem, let the women in for the lecture. Well, now everybody's interacting like this. In the prayer time, nobody was looking at anybody. But we needed a thing for that. It's like, so this is where the religion is easy in its basis, in its evidence, in its reality. It makes sense. It's rational. If you choose a opinion. Now, if you play around with the religion, researching fatwa shopping for an opinion that suits your desires, and then you start to see harm in your spirituality or harm in your reality because of it, then the point that they said is applied. And now you're playing with the religion. You're making the religion submit to your desires. But even then, I read a whole entire book by Sheikh Shaltut al-Azhari, one of the great scholars of Azhar from the mid-20th century. And he said that, why are we making this thing? If they're following a legitimate scholar, not some strange opinion that only one guy said, but they're following a legitimate opinion, why are we making that a problem, right? Even if it was their desire. It's not like this is some evil thing. Some scholar of great purport is saying that is halal, right? Why should we make a big deal? So, yeah, inshallah, it's easy for you. Don't make the religion hard on yourself.
So people that go for like halal meat only, is that like to the extremes?
It's not extreme. I mean, it's an opinion, a well-established opinion in the Quran and the Sunnah. But to not pray and to make a big deal about eating halal meat is extreme. It's actually completely contradictory and hypocritical. But to be like everybody who eats out there is doing a sin, that's extreme. That is not Islam. Because great scholars from many schools of thought across the world and here in America have said that's not true. So who are you to judge everybody else? If you feel comfortable in opinion that you're following, follow, but don't go around commanding everybody else the opinion that you are assuming is right from some scholars that you are not one of them. So you're just following an opinion. Here's what happened. Some of the brothers went out to eat here in Charlotte. And one of the brothers is convinced in the opinion that I can eat whatever, but he's there with all his brothers from India. And he ordered the chicken. These brothers till today did not let him forget about it. It's a shame religion. It's that nitpicky, control freak religion. Where our way, it's like a tribalism. It's like this is the one, we were raised in it. It's like we're disgracing our forefathers or something. No, he has an opinion that's well established. Let him do what he do. But here's what happens. The way they know, the way they're thinking and the way they've been taught, the second people start thinking for themselves, then we'll lose all control over the people here. Right? We need to brainwash everybody to parrot the religion without any knowledge and just follow without question what we are making opinions. Right? And even tell them, don't go following the Quran based upon your own reading. You need us to tell you what that means. Right? So it's a matter of control. Right? And the Jews, they were not being simple and just obeying whatever God said. They needed full, detailed control over this matter, right? Before they could just do it. So that's, I think that's that. Extremism is whenever you start to see harm. So dividing up the community on things. Even things people ask the Imam. Like, Imam, don't do this because then people will be divided. I said, will I be dividing or will they be choosing to use whatever I'm doing, which is a very valid and established part of the Ahl Sunnah tradition, to divide? Is the problem in me or in them? Well, the problem's in them. How can we go forward if they're the ones leading? You're hiring me as the Imam, but you're telling me these people with their rigid, harsh, extremist opinions, we should cater to them. And that's probably what the sickness is in all of most mosques. Is that many Imams, and I've talked to actually some Imams here in Charlotte, they actually feel this way. That if they do not fall under this particular thing, if they don't say the safe or the culturally approved, commonplace, religious mentality in the country they're from, then there's going to be some beef. And you're going to lose your job. Right? So what is an Imam? Why do we have one if we know our religion so well? Right? So I think that's it. I think we've gone, mashallah. We might need to edit this one up a little bit. Wallahu inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Subhanakallah bihamdik. Shadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.